Hi guys, it's Mark Zicree, Mr. Sci-Fi, also known as Mark Zicree of Space Command, and we are embarked on our Kickstarter campaign, which is listed down below, so you can click on that, you can pledge to Space Command. There's tons of amazing perks, and you can help support Space Command so we can finish the episodes we've shot, so we can shoot more episodes. We're not like CBS All Access or Amazon or Netflix or any of those. It's you guys making this happen. And meantime, we're pitching the shows and all of that, but I'm not waiting because I don't want to wait. Why should I? And you shouldn't want to wait either. So pledge to Space Command. We got to clear about $1,000 a day to make this campaign work. And that's up to you guys, not to me. And so anything you can do to help is much appreciated. You can also buy Space Command shares at $7,500 each, or $3,750 for a half share. You can email me at markzicree@gmail.com to find out all about that. But that is not what we're talking about here. Here's what we're going to talk about. It's been very busy in our lives with the pandemic and Black Lives Matter and so forth. And for those of you who don't know, I'm very liberal, as is Elaine. Her parents were communists, of all things. And Elaine was involved in the civil rights movement going back to Martin Luther King. And she was on the Poor People's March in '68 and all that stuff. And so Black Lives Matter, we certainly understand what's going on. We've been out on the streets on some of the protests, and I think it's very important. Let me boil it down as simply as possible, because this is not an issue of left or right. It really isn't. It's a very, very simple issue. And I don't mean to go political on you, and please don't think of this as political. The promise of America is very simple. It's that whatever you were defined as, where you came from, or whoever hated you, where you came from, or whatever rights were denied to you, wherever you came from, you come to America and you're treated as an equal. You can become whatever you want to be. You can live a life of safety and freedom and aspiration. It's that simple. Now, yes, the black people were kidnapped and were brought here, and slavery lasted for 400 years, and the ripple effect of slavery has continued to this very day. And there are all sorts of terrible things being done to lots of people, and everyone can always point the finger at some other group. But all we really want, if we believe in the American dream, is that everyone be given an equal chance, everyone have the same opportunity, everyone be able to have their children be safe, be protected, and have a life better perhaps than their lives. That's the American dream. It's that simple. So, okay, end of speech. But this is not a left-right issue. This is an issue of fairness and equality. And, and I speak as someone who, if my family had stayed back where they came from, I wouldn't be giving this talk. My mom and her family would have been gassed in Auschwitz like all the rest of their families. So I speak as someone who survived because of America. And I'm very grateful to this country, and I think everyone deserves the opportunities my family had, and the opportunities that no doubt your family has had. So that's it. But the reason I'm talking about all this is because recently I was talking about black science fiction writers, because, as you know, I came up with the episode of Deep Space Nine, Far Beyond the Stars, that it presented the life of the science fiction writers in the 50s, and it had a black writer writing under a white pseudonym, and it was about telling the truth as you see it as an artist, and it was about creating a future where all these different races, human and alien, can live together in peace and can make a life worth living, which is basically the notion of Space Command as well. But when I wrote that, when I came up with that episode, and when I was talking to Harlan Ellison, who was one of my advisors on it because he wrote during that period, I said, were there any black science fiction writers in the 50s or earlier? Because I knew of black science fiction writers coming to prominence in the 60s and beyond. Samuel R. Delany, the great Chip Delany, was one of my teachers at Clarion, and so he came to prominence in the 60s. And Octavia Butler, whom I knew and who we both took the same writing class from Theodore Sturgeon, and I knew her just after she had changed her name from Estelle to Octavia Butler, and she was a terrific writer and a wonderful person, and she rose up to prominence in the 70s and beyond, and so forth. And I know a number of the other black science fiction writers now, but I didn't know of any in the 50s or earlier. So I started, checking it out, looking around, and I found this one. This is a first edition of this book, Black No More. It's by George S. Schuyler, who was part of the Harlem Renaissance. This is a first edition. I love old books, as you know. This is the bookstore that sold it. This is the little blurb about it. It's a science fiction novel. It was published in 1931, and it says on the title page, Black No More, being an account of the strange and wonderful workings of science in the land of the free, AD 1933 to 1940. And what it covers, it's a satirical novel creating a future where there's a medical technique that's developed where black people can be turned white. And it's about the journey of several of these characters who were black and now they're white, and what opportunities present themselves. And it's a satire, and it's a very, very fun book. And and you can actually get it on as an audiobook. Elaine and I listened to it on the drive to and from our anniversary in Morro Bay, and or you can buy a recent edition that's only a few bucks. And the dedication, it says, this book is dedicated to all Caucasians in the Great Republic who can trace their ancestry back 10 generations and confidently assert that there are no black leaves, twigs, limbs, or branches on their family trees. So this book was written in 1931. It's set in 1934 to 40, and it's a satire of race relations and when all the black people turn white and what happens. And it's very interesting. It really summons up that time and that place, and it's really worth reading. It's still very timely, and if you read it, you'll see echoes very much of what's going on in the country now. And but that was a science fiction novel written by someone who probably would not have identified himself as a science fiction writer. He had a very long career as a writer. He started as a liberal and ended up, interestingly enough, as a black conservative. And he wrote an autobiography called Black Conservative. And so he had falling out with many of the other Harlem Renaissance writers ultimately, but a very interesting man, very talented writer. And I'm really glad I got to read this book and I found out about it. So there you go. George S. Schuyler, Black No More. And if anyone, by the way, is able to find what the dust jacket looked like on this book, I haven't been able to track that down. I would love to make a copy of the dust jacket to put on this marvelous book. So that's it for now. If you know of any other black science fiction writers from the 50s or earlier, I would be very interested in finding out about them. And beyond that, I'm so glad that science fiction, it's always been a big tent, and it's always allowed very different kinds of attitudes. And back when I was growing up, it allowed writers from the right and the left. And there was a very interesting ad that was published in the 60s, the mid-60s, in one of the magazines, I think it may have been Galaxy, where on the right-hand side, it had the writers who were supporting the Vietnam War, and on the left-hand side, it had the science fiction writers who were opposed to the Vietnam War. And for the first time, because I grew up reading all these writers and loving them, Heinlein and Asimov and Arthur C. Clarke and Theodore Sturgeon and, Ray Bradbury and so forth, but I had no idea whose politics were whose, because I wasn't attuned to those things when I was a kid. And suddenly I saw that Robert Heinlein was on the right, and Poul Anderson was on the right, and Harlan Ellison was on the left, and Theodore Sturgeon was on the left, and so forth. And it was fascinating to see that. So science fiction was a big tent that allowed a lot of different viewpoints, but now, from the 60s onward, it's allowed more and more diverse voices. So gay writers and straight writers and transgender writers and black writers and Latino and Asian and all sorts of viewpoints. And I think that's terrific, because that allows us to look through the lenses of other people's viewpoints to see what possible futures might be. And of course that reflects back on our present and on their past. And of course Octavia Butler wrote the great book Kindred, which was a modern black person going back to the days of slavery and experiencing that journey. So a great book, and I highly recommend that as well. So that's about it for now. Thanks for everything you can do to help Mr. Sci-Fi. And again, as you know, I generally don't talk politics, and if I've offended any of you, I apologize. I don't mean to. I have another channel called Mr. Politics that I post every now and then on, where I do speak more politically openly. But again, I welcome fans of Mr. Sci-Fi and fans of Space Command and Star Trek who are all along the spectrum. I think there's room for everybody, as long as we come with a kind heart and compassion and an acceptance that our views may not be the same as other people's, but as long as we can live together and help each other, we create a world worth living in. So that's it for now. Talk soon, and thanks a lot, guys. Bye.